When I finished Lady Marmalade, I knew it was ready to mix, is because I shed a little tear. Or I get excited, or I feel like I'm done. It's like a Frankenstein thing where it becomes what it's supposed to become, and I can't do anymore, and I've reached the end of my attention span for it, and it's gonna be what it's gonna be. That's it.
All right, good morning, folks, and welcome to RenmanMusicandBusiness.com. My name is Steve Rennie, and I am the Renman, and this little program is called Renman Live. If you've not watched before, let me tell you what we're up to. Every week, or just about for the last 3 years, I've been getting together with some of the smartest, most talented, most successful people in today's music business to talk about what it takes to succeed in this business. So if you're looking to do something great in this music business but think you might need a little help, you are in the right place here today. Our guest this week is going to be a great one. He's a music producer and A&R guru. His name is Ron Fair. He's going to join us here today to talk about what it takes to make great music, and then probably equally important, what it takes to actually get it heard. But before we meet Ron, I want to introduce you to my wonderfully talented and helpful Renman Live team over there. Let's go, camera 4. Joe, put yourself on there, big boy.
Hello, hello.
Gotcha. Okay,
hey,
over there in the darkness is Joseph Pepalonius Pepe, who is a musician by trade who just moved out here from North Carolina to chase his music business dream. How you doing over there, Joe?
I'm doing awesome. I'm
Joe
stoked.
Is a bass player and a guitarist, but as you can see, he's learning some new tricks here by necessity here today.
Yeah.
Over to his left, don't answer it yet, Ev. Get yourself in the picture there, is our other team member. He's a latest intern. He's a Trojan man. He's part of the Trojan family. He's also part of the Rennie family. His name is Evan Rennie, and he happens to be my son. He's also a student at the USC Thornton School of Music Business. How you doing over there, Ev?
Pretty good. How about you?
Good, man. We actually had a question for you today, Evan. That's how, you're getting famous, I suppose. Jeez. But anyway, all right, so that's the team over there. Back to me, Joe. If this is your first time watching the show today, let me tell you how it works. This is our 126th show against all odds. And what makes our show unique out there in terms of web shows is that we want you folks to actually be part of the conversation. So if any of you out there today have ever complained about nobody at a record company will return my phone call, they won't return my emails, it's impossible to get to an A&R guy. Wrong! You can make that all happen today, and here's how you're going to do it. We've got a saying around here at the camp: you don't ask, you don't get, you don't learn anything, folks. So I want you to step up the line and ask some questions. Let me tell you how you can do it. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, first I want you to come over to live.renmanmb.com and be a part of the party right here. First thing you can do is you can post in the chat room right there over on the side of our player. It's from another show, but you'll figure it out. You can post your question right there. Evan Rennie's going to be looking for the best possible questions. Now, I'll tell you up front so nobody gets their feelings hurt. Evan he knows what questions are going to be asked during the show on my part. So if your question is going to be asked, he's probably going to just tell you, hey, we're going to be getting that one. But he's looking for great questions, and we'll take a couple later in the broadcast. Now, if you're old school, like me, kind of, but you like calling in on the phone, you can dial in on our hotline. Show them the hotline, Joe, at 310-469-9067. They're already calling. If it's busy, don't go to pieces, folks. Good things don't happen in a minute. We'll get to you. And I'll tell you what, if you do get through on that hotline today, I'm going to give you a little bonus. I'm going to give you a free copy of our online course called Insider's Guide to Today's Music Business, and we'll talk about that at the end of the show. All right, folks, so don't be shy. Remember, you don't ask, you don't get, you don't learn anything. All right? Now, let's get down to business. Our guest today has had an incredibly successful career in the music business, both as a creative person, a music maker, and also as an executive helping to make sure that music gets heard. He's been worked as a record label chairman and president. He's been one of the top A&R executives for the better part of 30 years. He's a record producer, he's an arranger, and he's a musician, engineer, and songwriter amongst his many talents. He's best known, I suppose, amongst many things, but for launching the careers of Christina Aguilera, Black Eyed Peas, Fergie, Pussycat Dolls, Keisha Cole, and Vanessa Carlton, just to name a few. I'm excited to have him on the show today because he brings a unique perspective to any conversation about what it takes to succeed in this music business, both from the music making side and also from what it takes. He's a real music man. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Ron Fair. Thank you very much here. All right, missed the cue, Joe. All right.
We can do it again. We can do the handshake again.
I'll tell you the cue here. Where is it, Joe? Come on. We got all kinds of gags on here, but Ron, okay, I'll help out a little bit today, Joe. Anyway, first off, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us here today. I know you're a busy guy, and but this is important for all these folks. That's a rare opportunity to talk with somebody who's actually been doing this for a very, very, very long time. So let me give you a brief. The folks that are watching our show, Ron, most of them artists, musicians, songwriters, and want to be professionals. Most of them are starting out, and most of them are looking for some knowledge and inspiration. So the first thing I ask every one of my guests, and I'm going to ask you the same, is when you're starting out in the business, the toughest thing is getting started. How did you get started in this music business, and what inspired you to make it a career?
It's such a multifaceted question because making it relevant to today is going to be difficult because the conditions that existed when I broke in are so different. When I first started in recording music, you know, we had analog tape, we had basic microphones, we had little consoles, we didn't have anything like computers and plugins and Pro Tools and Appleton and, you know, any of the things that people make music on today, GarageBand or Logic or any of that. So my infiltration into was very much that. I kind of identified where people in the record industry and musicians and songwriters congregated, and I think in 1977 when I first came in, I was 22 years old, that was a restaurant on Cahuenga called Martoni's.
Been there many times.
And that was where you would run into everybody who was cutting a record in Hollywood. There used to be a community of studio musicians, guys who played on records, who would go from studio to studio and be the backing band for all the pop records. Of course, there were, you know, producers, and it was a culture. And I identified at the beginning that I needed to get into the culture. I was very fortunate in that I was able to glom on to characters and become mentored by them. And the very first person who tremendously influenced my life, and to this day, is a great character by the name of Bill Conti. Bill Conti is famous for winning the Oscar for the music to the original Rocky movie.
Okay.
And of course the instrumental theme "Gonna Fly Now," da 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 da, that became a #1 pop record. He composed the score. So Bill went to Juilliard, and he was a blazing jazz piano player, but also a classical guy. And then his next stop was Italy, where he was a conductor and producer for Italian pop artists. This is probably 1973 or 4. He came to Hollywood as a struggling film composer, and he booked time at the studio where I was working as a toilet cleaner, phone answerer, and gopher, which was called Hollywood Spectrum, which was nowhere near Hollywood, and there was no Spectrum. It was just a little hole-in-the-wall, 8-track dive that was owned by a dentist and a jazz singer. My friend from high school who ran the high school radio station, I mean, you can't make this stuff up, so I just got to tell the truth. He had a small ownership stake in that studio and allowed me to be the gopher and the sweep-up guy and the toilet cleaner and the run-for-coffee dude. And I was more than happy to do it because I just wanted to be around recording. You know, having been an aspiring musician and piano player and wedding singer and bar mitzvah band leader and everything else that I did to support myself so that I could leave home as a teenager, which was my paradigm. So at Hollywood Spectrum, I met Bill Conti. We worked on a couple of smaller, you know, like industrial films that he was commissioned to compose. Like little weird configurations, like he would do a score that would be like 4 cellos and a synth, or, you know, 6 violins and a celeste. And it was all about, miking music on the fly and getting a great sound really quickly and committing it to 1-inch 8-track tape. We had an Ampex machine. So engineering was always a part of my skill set that I had picked up. And Bill kind of took me with him. His next job was a little film from a guy who nobody ever heard of called Sylvester Stallone, and the movie was Rocky, and it was a low-budget film that, Sylvester Stallone, to his great credit, insisted that he play the role, and it took him years and years to get the financing to make the movie, and he finally did, from Irwin Winkler and Robert Chartoff. So Bill got the job as the composer somehow, and he called me up and he said, Ron, Thursday we're going to a studio in Hollywood called TTG. It's on McCadden. We're recording from 3 to 6. I need you to come because the engineer might not read the music and he might not understand the cues. So we have to, if we need to turn off the harp mic at bar 36 because the trumpets are going to play. The trumpets are sitting next to the harp, like there's leakage, there was issues. So you read the score and you give the cues to the engineer. That 3-hour session was the original score for Rocky. The entire movie score and all of the singles, including Gonna Fly Now and the R&B record that came out of it, You Take My Heart Away, were all recorded and mixed, leadered, and completed in 3 hours, start to finish. I got $60.
Got paid, right?
I got paid, and the if you're geeking out there, if you're a tech geek at all about music and music production, there's a synthesizer part in Gonna Fly Now that leads to the chorus that goes. There's an octave leap synthesizer part which was flown in, meaning we had a wild track, another tape machine that only had that part on it, and you hit the button on a cue and that would play into the mix because we didn't have enough tracks to record that part, and that would play live into the final mix. So I pressed the button on the synth part on Gonna Fly Now, which was my musical contribution to that record, which actually went on to become a #1 pop record around the world. And the phenomenon of Rocky was born, and it was everything about it. It was the film, it was Stallone's career, it was the music, it was Bill Conti's career. And I was an active participant in the spark of creation, which was really galvanizing for me. And the best part of the story is the punchline when I was at another studio. There used to be so many studios in Hollywood, and I was a shitty jazz piano player and had delusions about being competitive as a fusion player. I admired everybody from Errol Garner to Ahmad Jamal to Dave Brubeck to Chick Corea to Oscar Peterson. I was like, but I was terrible. I was not a good jazz piano player, but I was a good jazz thinker. But that was my passion at the time. And we were doing a session at a studio called El Dorado, which is now a parking lot in Hollywood. And Bill Conti showed up, and he had this thing under his arm, and it was wrapped in brown paper, and he ripped the brown paper off it, and he handed me my first gold record in front of my friends.
I love that.
And that was for the album for Rocky.
You know what I love about your story, too, is, by the way, before I'm thinking about it, come up, just push this blackboard in front of that window for me. Part I love about it, so many people want to start at the money zone, with the Grammy and all that stuff. I love the fact that you started by cleaning toilets. That was your entry point. So for all the people out there trying to figure it out, thinking that it's all magic, so often people it's just get a start any way you can, and God knows where it can lead.
But Steve, the thing is, for me, recording, because my background was, my grandfather was a broadcaster. I was around recording studios and tape recorders and microphones and turntables since I was 2 years old. So for me, the recording environment in the studio was like a church. It was a covenant. That was something that was very, very special to me, and I took it seriously. So even as a young assistant, I used to have the Batman's utility belt, because recording environments have the same situations over and over. So as a guy who would do setting up microphones and facilitating sessions as an assistant, there was always requests like, do you have an adapter? Do you have a headphone adapter? Do you have a pencil? Do you have a roach clip? Do you have a crayon? Do you have a razor blade? Whatever it is that the musicians on the floor would ask for the same things over and over again. So I had a utility belt.
Love it.
That I would have all those supplies and be able to just hand somebody whatever they requested right there on the fly because I anticipated their needs as musicians. And so I was, was pretty crafty and really, really, really into the recording process to this day, and treat it with the utmost respect. It's kind of like a holy thing for me to record.
Let's talk about that making music. That's good stuff there, I gotta say. Let's talk about this idea of making music. One of the reasons I was so happy to have you here is because you have that unique perspective as a music guy, but you also ran labels and worked as an executive at the top levels of business. At the core of the music business are great songs and great artists. While lots of things have changed about the music business, that part hasn't changed. So I'd like to spend a little time talking about that idea of making music. We got a ton of questions from our members out there today. And you've been making music for a long time. You've been part of a ton of great hits here. So the first question I want to ask before we get to all the member questions, folks, sorry, it's my show, is I'm interested to hear from your perspective. I asked you to describe what is it that makes a great song? Because everybody says, you got to have great music. You got to have great music. You got to have great music. But it's often difficult to describe. Describe for me, in your eyes, what is it that makes a great song?
This is it's a tremendous riddle. Mm-hmm. One of the great questions of the ages, and I'll put that on my beach a little bit. Like, I am not really a songwriter. I'm usually the best musician in the band, and I can leap to any instrument and play as good as anybody that I've signed. But I'm not a songwriter. And the reason, although I can arrange, I can make musical devices that occupy the space of a song, but I'm not a songwriter because a song has to have a viewpoint. And I'm so neutral in my approach to music that I don't really have a personal viewpoint. My immediate reaction to anything is to just make whatever's there as good as it can be. But in songwriting and talking about, the alchemy of a hit or of a great song, it could be something as bonehead as "Kiss Me Through the Phone" by Soulja Boy, or as something as beautiful as "No Woman No Cry" by Bob Marley, or something as dope and immediate and funky as "I Can't Feel My Face." And that the X factor of what makes a song connect is always the viewpoint and some kind of message. I feel like people, for the most part, hear the words to a song first, especially females, and that the adequacy of the music, most of the records that are out are very adequate. The beats are well stated and the production is good enough, and it's not a contest of which kick drum or which bass line sounds better. It's really the message of the song, what's being communicated, and what viewpoint it takes, and whether it strikes a unique chord, an intellectual chord, a visceral chord, or a stupid chord like "Watch Me Whip, Watch Me Nay Nay." You could say that song is as meaningful and as good as "Hello" by Adele, because they both serve the same purpose, which is to entertain and to communicate.
And to connect. So
I don't really ever, even though I have the ability to musically adjudicate the amount of talent it was required to create the musical piece, I leave all that shit out.
Let's talk about that for a second, because while you're a musician, but you're not a songwriter, you presided over, as producer, executive producer, over tons of big records here. In a couple of weeks, you've worked on a lot of records that won Grammys. In a couple of weeks here, they'll be handing out some more Grammys for the producer of the year, right? And yet, in my heart of hearts, I know that most people don't really know what it is a producer does. Sometimes it's tactical, sometimes it's playing, and sometimes it's just point of view. Talk about, what the role is of a producer, and also the distinction between producer, executive producer, for the folks out there that have seen your name and seen all these titles, but they're not quite sure what that means.
Well, you'll probably remember this, and know this from your fine career as an artist manager, Steve, that in the record space, in the record industry, credits are a political device and a political operative, and you really never know who did what on a record unless you were there. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes The engineer is the guy whose hand was on or whose foot was on the gas pedal, who made that thing happen because he put a weird sound on something and that's what made it a hit. Or the guitar player in the band was really the driving force, and the producer was the guy who was going to the deli and getting the sandwiches. But I will break it down into categories just real quick. The trend right now is that the person who is called the producer is the songwriter, who wrote the track. If you consider put together the track, chose the sounds, played the parts, he's called the producer in a lot of cases today. We used to call that the songwriter. We used to call the beat the arrangement. But there's also producers who do not play a note, who do not sing a note, but they're tastemakers, and they're hand holders, and they're psychologists. And their presence in a recording studio with a band, by creating a tone and an environment and a headspace, allows something to be created that wouldn't have been created if he wasn't there, or she wasn't there. So, there's technical producers who are the guys who are actually jumping on the Pro Tools rig, chopping up files, editing, cutting, pasting, flying. There's other producers who are, the architect of the song. There's other producers who are functionaries of getting it done. There's no real definition, and you don't know who really did what, regardless of the credits, unless you were there.
And I suspect that some of that changes by virtue of who you're working with. I found as a manager, certainly, that the one-size-fits-all approach has its limitations and so forth. I got a bunch of questions about making music, so I'll try to bang through this many, because I know after the show's over, so many people will be pissed because I didn't ask their question here. So I'm going to try to bang through a couple of these as fast as we can. Here's one from our member, Susan, right? You got that one, Joe?
Inspires you, right?
Yeah. Okay. Here's her question. What inspires you, and how do you know when a song is perfected when you're in that studio? Real quick. How do you know when you're done? I know that a lot of artists keep going and going and going and going.
Yeah, that's true. I'm going to take that question personally. The thing is, generally when I've finished with my process, and I'm never in a hurry, and personally me, like, I'm a tinkerer, so I like to just tinker with things, and I'm somewhat slow tortoise and the hare. In that process.
I didn't mean that question personally, Ron.
No, but there's a funny thing, because when I finished Lady Marmalade, and I'm listening, I'm in there, I'm working on the vocals. It's complex vocal production with 4 different singers and ad libs and interwoven ad libs. When I knew it was ready to mix, it's because I shed a little tear, or I get excited, or I feel like I'm done, like I've had enough. And I want to push the child out of the house and go live your life. The record becomes, it's like a Frankenstein thing, where it becomes what it's supposed to become, and I can't do anymore, and I've reached the end of my attention span for it, and it's going to be what it's going to be. Now, typically, my ear is so much more anal and analytical than the consumer that I realize my scale is way beyond the listener, so I just tend to, self-police and go all right, fine. But if I cry,
then you know.
I know I'm done.
Funny to hear you say that, because when I used to work with Brendan O'Brien a lot, he would always play me a rough mix, and musicians would tell you all these nuances of it, and I'd sit there and go, you know what? Sounds done to me.
Yeah.
Right? And it was that notion about the tear or whatever is it, where you feel that tug of the heart. I heard it on that new Adele song, Hello. God, 3 notes in, done, right? Because you can feel the emotion. Here's another one for you. During my career, I worked mostly with rock bands who tended to write their own songs, and typically used one producer, right? But in today's music business, and you've been a big part of the pop world, it seems like records are more of a committee approach. They're almost like having general contractors. Give me the beat, give me the top line, give me the this, give me the that. Lots of albums using different producers along the way. Our member Yolanda had a question. Put that one up there, Joe, if you would. She said, Ron, in your professional opinion, should an artist only work with one producer or multiple producers? Thoughts?
Well, I don't know that it's the artist's choice to make that call. If it's a pop artist, like a female vocalist, like a Jessie J. Tovlo, Ariana Grande, BB Rexa, name anybody, Taylor Swift, Nicki Minaj, looking in the female pop thing, like Rihanna. The notion that one producer is going to facilitate the repertoire of an album isn't correct. Because today what we call producers are, as I said before, really songwriters, and they produce the track. Typically somebody else produces the vocals, the way it's done today. If you're signed or making a record and you're the funding party of your own project, you can decide, I want to work with one person, I want the vibe to be cohesive, I want it to feel like it came from one viewpoint. Or you can decide, I want to just cherry pick and get the best from all the different individuals and different sources that are available to me and compile that. But I think even that is a kind of anachronistic question, Steve, because albums as such don't exist anymore. Yeah. It's something that's an artistic pursuit that fits certain artists but not others. And that where we are today with streaming and downloads and the focus on one song and the nature of things, making albums the way we used to and how that used to exist, a collection of work, a body of work, I think is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, no, it's ironic that, that we've kind of gone back 50 years to the 50s when artists made singles. If you had enough singles, they put them on an album.
Right.
And part of that was a technology issue. You had a single and that was as much room as you had and so forth and so on. Let me ask you another question that you touched on there. Over the course of your career, you worked with all kinds of different artists, including rock bands where I suspect it was more like an Incubus or a Pearl Jam. One guy, band writes the songs Live or Die By.
Yeah, I worked with Snow Patrol and Dave Matthews. And
okay, so those folks I know are not bringing in, so they're not interested in writing with the guy from freaking, who's the Chad from Nickelback and all these wacky suggestions I heard over the years as a manager. But even though you work with a bunch of different artists, it seems like you've had your biggest successes with female artists. In fact, you married one and have had 4 hit records with her. Our member, Stephen Cohen, who's a young manager, had a question about that. Joe, throw that up on the screen, Brad. He said, Ron, is there a difference about how you go about working with a female artist compared to a male artist?
It's there is no difference specific to gender like that. I just think that I couldn't tell you why, but I have more of an affinity. I couldn't tell you why. Maybe it has to do with my growing up experience and the influence of my older sister. I work with men just as easily as with women, but my bigger successes have come from female projects, and my bigger successes also as, we call A&R to A&R, make it into a verb, but in hiring executives and in training people and in spawning careers of people in my life, the biggest successes in that area were all female also.
Yeah.
So there's some kind of father knows best dada thing about me that works better. I've never questioned it, but there are no specific differences with females and males that I'm aware of.
Yeah, interesting to hear that, because I for years worked exclusively with guys in bands, and I always, a couple times during my career, people wanted to hook me up with women, and I was worried that my kind of rah-rah Tommy Lasorda approach might be a little offensive.
Well, I have four female projects right now. I'm doing the album for Fantasia's new album for RCA, TLC's new album,
talk about TLC,
Keisha Cole's new album, and an artist that I have signed is also female. It's all females.
Yeah, well, so obviously you have something going on there. That's good stuff. Okay, Joe, I'm going to skip over one question because I want to make sure we get you out. You've got to be out here in an hour. Are you good? Or?
Yeah, I got a heart out in about 11, 12.
Okay, all right, perfect. Okay, we're going to skip that question number, that last one. Let's take a little break here real quick. Ron asked me earlier today where our show gets played. If you can't watch our show live, folks, no need to worry. We got all kinds of ways for you to do it. You can go and check it out on our YouTube channel. Let's see, I'll put that up there for you. YouTube.com/RenmanMB. You can find out all our past shows and all the clips and everything you'd want to know about the music business. And if you're like some of those members that send me notes about how they binged watch for a whole weekend, I guarantee you go for 5 or 6 weekends. That's YouTube. If you want to take our show on the road with you, get a little thought process going while you're traveling on a train, plane, hopefully not while, maybe even while you're driving a car. You can check us out on SoundCloud and iTunes. Obviously, that's the vocal version, vocal mix, not with the video. Great place to check it out, and you can get all those. We'll have them up by the end of the day. Just type in Renman Live on iTunes or SoundCloud, and you'll be right there, and you'll be able to learn on the go here. Okay, we got any questions from the chat room there, Ev?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on. We got a call there right now.
No, it's Kat.
Okay, good. Okay, actually, we'll come back. We're going to do Kat, and then we'll come back and get one from the chat room here. So write down that question for you. When we did put the show out there and we promote it, I like to reward the people that take some initiative, Ron. So we ran a promotion where, hey, send in your question for Ron, and I'm going to pick somebody and ask you to join us on the show rather than making random calling in on the phone, because that phone is busy a lot of times. So assuming some artist has made some great music now, right? And we've talked about how that all goes, and you've given some great thoughts on that. If you're looking to sell lots of records, folks, the way you do that is by signing with a big label. Whether you love them or hate them, they have a machine in place that does that. And so this notion of connecting with major labels and connecting with people in the business is really difficult, and it's at the heart of why I do this show, is to help make that connection. We've got a ton of questions from our members along those lines, but I wanted to pick one today that kind of summarizes a lot of that. Her name is Kat McDowell, who's going to join us on the phone here. She's a singer-songwriter, very talented. She grew up in New Zealand, had some success selling records in Japan, and she's recently moved to LA to pursue her dream to make some music. I'd like to welcome Kat. Is he on the line with us?
Yeah.
Joe, put her in. Kat McDowell, meet Ron Fair.
Hi, Ron.
Hi, Kat McDowell.
Throw her picture up there
Hi.
so everybody can see what she looks like here, Joe Pepe. All right, Kat, nice to have you on the show today. And
Thank you.
we tried to get it to happen on Skype, but we had a dodgy connection here, so I wanted to make sure we
Yeah.
got a chance to talk to Kat. Kat, you're on with Ron. What's your
Yeah.
question?
Oh, Ron, it's been so great to hear your stories. It's so inspiring, and I want to thank you for helping to shape the careers of so many inspiring female artists that I grew up listening to.
Thank you.
My question is, in this day and age, in the technology age, how does an indie artist like myself get the attention of someone like you?
Well,
Good question.
the good and bad news about the internet, which I didn't have when I was at your stage, it's an even playing field, but it's also quicksand. So
Yeah.
you can enter, you can post music, you can build a gigantic social profile for yourself, all from your phone, and you can also disappear and sink and die just as easily because everybody else is doing it. But there's kind of a phenomenon, or not a phenomenon, but I would say a changed practice in and among record companies, where the field of A&R, which was artisan repertoire and the mystical choosing of an act and putting resources into it, funding, love, nurturing, recording, practice, and developing stuff, it's really changed because of the technology, so that now A&R staffs are populated by what they call research people. And I'm going to get to the point in a second here, Kat. So these research type A&R people really look to the internet as like a vein of gold, like gold miners who would pan for gold and like put their pans in the actual river and hope to find gold nuggets. These guys are trolling through the internet. They sit at desks all day long. They go by word of mouth, hairdressers, grandmothers, friends of friends, kids in school, bus drivers, whatever, to get a tip on something that's popping off on the internet, thinking that the numbers that are generated from views and friends and likes actually indicate that there's a market for that music, even though there's no real methodology for it. So the good news is that for an artist like yourself, if you can make a record of some kind, build it somehow virally, because it's always alchemy. We don't know how these things happen. We don't know how. We've said it before on the show, Watch Me Whip, Watch Me Nay Nay, which was a viral hit, reached the point where it was a frenzy and it became, like the Macarena. But it's an even playing field. So socials become crucial, even though Bruno Mars had 3 Facebook friends when he was signed. 3. Yeah. Nobody gave a shit how many likes or friends or socials Bruno Mars had because he was that fucking good that nobody cared. And by the way, he turned out to be Bruno Mars, and the deal was sealed when you saw him play drums on the Super Bowl.
He also got passed on 2 times.
100
before,
times.
Yeah.
But he wasn't signed because he had
social.
a social profile. But what I'm saying for you is, so it works both ways. You need the magic of that magic song, which, by the way, even playing field, the sync racket of getting your music in television shows and commercials, like that's wide open. I mean, they're always turning to unknown stuff to sync for commercials and television because they don't want to pay.
I was going to say, that's partly a financial, but there's also great music out there that's not on labels if you're looking around.
And you know, there's like, so far in our conversation today, we've been talking about commercial hits, big stars, but there's a whole other level of music that is artistic and independent and not reliant on the confirmation of the public to validate its existence. And there's all different kinds of, there's a lid for every pot. So my advice to you, if you're not, recognized yet by an A&R person or a label, is like nobody's stopping you from making a cell phone. Like I met a girl, her name was Kimberly Henderson. She sang the Sam Smith record holding her cell phone in her kitchen, and it went on to 1 million. By the way, beautiful girl, 24-year-old mom. She was holding her baby, single mom. She sang, "Oh, Won't You Stay With Me," holding her cell phone in her kitchen in Alabama, wherever the hell she was. And it goes viral, and she got invited to perform on Ellen. She did a bunch of web stuff. A big-time manager signed her up. They're developing her now as an artist. It just came from her kitchen. So we didn't have that before. We used to have a lawyer. You used to know somebody. You used to have to know somebody. The playing field is magnificently even. But it's also quicksand.
Yeah, we're going to talk some more about some of those things you talked. Now, Kat here, just
did I ask the question, by the way?
Oh, we got a whole bunch, but you're actually hinting on some other things I want to talk about here. But Kat has built a great YouTube following. She's got very clever videos. She's doing a lot of the right things here in town. And I say that, Kat, because I'm familiar. She's one of our RenmanU online mentor courses students, and she's doing a lot of great stuff out there. And I tell Kat all the time. Sometimes Cheryl Crow is a hero of Kat's. And I think about how long Cheryl Crow was out doing all those right things before she found that great moment of timing and lighting where the right song, the right people, and the right moment all came together. And of course, she had to have the talent to make it happen here. So,
well, in Cheryl's case, her particular path, because I was there at the beginning, and she was a background singer. She sang back. She was, a beautiful blonde chick with a great voice. By the way, Cheryl Crow can rip opera just as easily as she can sing a beautiful country song. She happens to be a incredible singer, and she was doing background vocals, and that's how she got noticed. She stuck out. She felt like a star, and somebody gave her a shot in those days with a development deal. They made her first album was scrapped.
Scrapped, yep, I remember.
And then, the alchemy happened, and she's had a phenomenal career. One of my favorite artists. I love Cheryl.
I love the way you refer to alchemy, Ron. That's, I guess, your version of timing and lighting is what I call it. So you're an artist and I'm a manager. He says alchemy, I say timing and lighting. Well, Kat, you know what? Hopefully that gives you some thoughts about it. And I want to thank you for joining us here today. I feel like I should sponsor your internet connection so we could have had you in person, but we're too late for that today. So thanks for joining us, and I will talk to you again soon. And thanks for playing ball with us.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Ron.
Right, excellent. It's funny you were talking about how you find artists, and one of the questions I skipped, somebody asked this question about if you found somebody in a mall and there was some pretty young girl, what would you do? And the thought that came to my mind was Clive Davis early on, or not early in his career, later in his career. I think he found Alicia Keys and Whitney Houston when they were both teenagers, had nothing other than great voice, great potential, and he took the time to develop them. Let me ask you something else. That's a more general thing I've asked all the folks that are A&R folks on the show. Are there, I won't put it in terms of a checklist, but are there, when you're looking at an artist, you've identified, somebody that you think you want to get in business with, right? Is it all just about the talent? Is it about the attitude? Is it about the team behind them? Talk about what might be your mental checklist that you're checking off before you say, okay, we're going to sign you, we're going to commit the resource, I'm going to commit my time and money to see if we can make something happen?
You know, I kick myself many times over for the impulse of signing music because I loved the artist, or I loved the song, or I loved the direction, or I loved what I thought it could be in my mind, my delusion that I shared with the artist. But I have to say this, I think in the practicality of our world, if an artist does not have a really level-headed, decent, good person and informed manager, they have no chance. They have no chance. It is it is so much destruction on the highway. I have wasted, unfortunately, millions of dollars of corporate dollars and millions of hours of heartfelt belief, and skipped events with my children and my wife, and a chance to go to the movies or do the laundry because of my strong belief in an artist and a project, only to be derailed by the ineffectiveness or the stupidity of an unqualified manager. So the artist gives all of their control to the manager. The manager is really the one who tells the label what to do, especially with success. When your artist is successful, the manager is making all the calls, so that the projects that go on to really succeed are not because of the music. Yes, you have to have great music. Yes, you have to have the luck of the crowd and God's tailwind and all the weird shit that has to conspire to make a hit. But you gotta have a good manager. You gotta have a decent manager. You gotta have somebody that knows what they're doing, or it will all be wrecked.
Interesting to hear you say that, and something I can speak to a little bit. I think for the folks out there wondering, it's because that the great managers have an honest relationship with both the artist and the record label. And having spent some time working in a record label, I share your thoughts about it. And but you got to have great talent. But I think the point Ron's making here, and that's worth noting, is that this notion of developing a team and picking your partners on that front is so hugely important. That it can't be understated. And
there's also some randomness to it too, which is, an artist plays a gig, somebody comes up and goes, I think you're great. Nothing else is going on for that artist. They take a shot, they enter into showbiz, shit happens, and they're stuck. And, a lot of those random situations turned out to be the greatest things ever, like when the young Shep Gordon met the young Alice Cooper.
Bang. Yeah.
And neither one of them knew their ass from a hole in the ground, but they created an entire fucking universe together, and they each grew in their space, proportionally, and boom.
And it was interesting, too, what I've noted about those managers. There's a manager mentality. The real managers are always looking for answers. The real managers aren't really interested in whose ideas. They're just looking for ideas. And they ask questions. I've met some really great young managers who don't have experience on paper, but they have this mindset to, I don't know, but I'm going to find out, versus I don't know, let me bullshit and go and make up some story, which is what happens with young managers or inexperienced managers. It's not an age thing with labels that cause all kinds of grief. So,
the fans of the music, they don't know the backstory. Like, why did this artist come out with this record and it was such a big smash and I love that artist and now I never hear from them anymore. Mm-hmm. They don't know what went on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But it's a crucial element. Yeah. Yes, you have to have, Adele makes it look easy because she's so great, but let me tell you something. There's a combo plate there.
She's got a great manager, Rob Dickens. He ran a big record company.
She has. Well, it's Jonathan Dickens, but
his son, right?
She has a nephew.
Yeah.
She has. It's a team.
Yeah.
Sam Smith, great team.
Yeah.
And these managers have the power, and by the way, it's a tremendous field of opportunity for those who love the record industry, because managers today have more power than they ever did.
I agree. It's a different world out there. We skipped over a couple questions that you've kind of answered. One was from our member Will here to ask about prioritizing live experience, social media, and so forth. I think we touched on that those indicators are important, but what might be more important is a great song. If you got a bunch of great indicators, Ron, they had 1 million Facebook followers and all that stuff, but there was nothing there, you might be a little suspicious about it.
This reminds me, I've been asked these questions my entire career, and I get the logic of wanting to know, like, how do I get from point A to point B? I'm a guy with a song, I want to be a star. I am going to be, the next Kid Rock. Like, how do I do it? The thing is, there's no set path. There's no rule book.
There's no checklist, is there?
Is it more important to have good music or good socials? It depends who you ask. I could name A&R guys sitting in major labels right now that would say it's just all about the socials. Sorry, don't even show up unless you have 1 million this and 1 million Snapchats and 1 million Tumblrs and 1 million, whatever. And then there's other guys who will say, that's the kiss of death. I just want to hear the song. There's no. It's a frustrating thing for the chap who asked the question, but there's an expectation now, and this is very perplexing to me, Steve, that a young artist has to also be a great self-digital marketer. And the gland that it takes to operate the internet and all of the social aspects of it is not the same gland that Bob Dylan had when he sat in a coffee house or in a freezing cold apartment in Greenwich Village and wrote the music he did. He wasn't required to be a self-digital marketer. It wasn't about the marketing. But artists today, it's almost woven together. That their ability to self-market and their ability to make music are linked.
We had a question on that. I'll skip ahead here, Joe, from our gentleman Moss that touches on that very same subject, right? Because while we all know that's out there, his question I thought was really interesting. He says, do you think it's better to concentrate on improving my skills on my instrument, in this case he's a drummer, and not get caught up in the business until I'm blown away? I mean, you only have so many hours in the day, and while I talk a lot about business, people ask me, what should I do today? I said, if in doubt, I'd say try to write a great song. You're a music man. What would be your advice?
That's a good question, especially coming from a drummer, because you have something like Whiplash, which is the most magnificent music film probably ever made. The drumming thing is again, it's its own covenant. Like, first of all, the independence of 4 limbs making music together. Like, if it's a drummer and his passion is rhythmic subdivision and that's what gets him off, I would say drumming is such an evolved thing. You won't have time to be a hustling entrepreneur. If money and houses and cars and girls and jewelry and dinners are more exciting than drumming, then switch.
Yeah, that's great advice there. Got a couple more questions on this front, and some of them we touched on here. And what we talked about this notion back in the day, still true to some degree, right? If you go and send something to a label, they'll say we don't accept unsolicited material, right? Which seems kind of strange and seems almost impossible to break in if you're on the receiving end of it. So this notion of trusted sources kind of developed over the years. A guy like Ron Fair would be much more inclined to take a listen to something if it came from somebody you knew, had done business with, or it showed some sense from the music business. We had a question from D-Rock Tucker. You got it there, Joe? What's the best way to get songs in the hands is in this extreme era? Is a manager or lawyer still preferred? Because it's so wide open now? I have like answers for it, but all lanes of business should be open. All lanes on the freeway, traffic on all lanes. There's no set way to do it. If you have a manager, by the way, a bad manager with a terrible reputation or an unknown manager, that's not going to help you. It's worse than having
some
no
schlepper
manager.
Lawyer that doesn't have the inside track of the relationship. You don't need that. But what I'm saying is that given the level playing field, the best way to get in is to have a line around the block at your gig. And to have a bunch of socials on the internet and a great record. Like, will it get noticed? I don't know. But time after time, I was reading the cover of the Hollywood Reporter this morning about this actress Brie Larson, who is now the hottest actress on the planet from this one particular movie that wasn't even a hit movie. She's got a 20-year backstory. 20 years she was doing minor roles and working on and off. Now she's the it girl. It's the same story you hear over and over again about somebody who was in it, they stuck with it, they got lucky, they were ready. The main thing is if you get the shot, if God or the cosmos or whatever higher power you look towards picks you, be ready.
Be ready. I can't tell you, folks, how important that is. You know, it doesn't happen by accident. He was Rachel Platten most recently. She's 34 years old, and we know she must have been grinding around here forever. She gets the right song, right moment, bang, things happen. And it's why this business, folks, I say it to all of the folks that I deal with, who I'm in contact with every day. This business has to scream at you, okay? This business has to be something that you're almost obsessed about to get through all these moments of doubt and insecurity and fear. Let me ask you another question that comes up frequently. You and I grew up here in LA, and we take it for granted, right? And all the stuff that comes with it. You could go to Martoni's and meet big people in the business, or I could caddy at Hillcrest Country Club for the just absolute titans of the movie and music business. But for most folks, that's not the case, and moving to a music capital may or may not be an option in the short term. We had a question from one of our gentlemen, his name was August. I should also tell you that we left off part of the question. You got it there, Joe? He had sent me a note on our Ask Renman. I do a little version of Renman Live where I take questions, and he'd ask about, he'd met that manager you were talking about that was guaranteed going to get him airplay. It was guaranteed going to raise his profile, guaranteed going to do this and that, and wanted to know if paying 40% commission was a good idea. And I told him in no uncertain terms that wasn't. So I apologize, August, for rattling your cage. Well, here's his question here. Do you think it's currently more difficult for a Midwest band to be discovered than a Music City band? Does it matter to you, Ron, where they live?
You know,
does it make it easier, tougher?
I think the question is really about intuition and counterintuition. Like, if it were me, a band in the Midwest that has a line around the block is probably worth more than a band in LA with a line around the block, just because of the authenticity of the people that live in the interior of the country. You know, what moves the needle in the heartland, I think, has more weight than what moves the needle in fickle big cities like New York and Los Angeles. So I think that there's a paradigm shift. There's a book about this exact thing that I think is really interesting called Cult of the Amateur, where in our current iteration of society, the so-called professionals who give opinions are actually, their word is actually worth less than the guy who says, hey, I don't really know what I'm talking about. I'm just a plumber, but this is what I think. The entire existence of blogs validates that theory. So big city versus small city, to me, it rings a little bit of that cult of the amateur. There's nothing lesser or nothing more unfortunate about being in a small Midwest place than a big city. And I think there's plenty of bands who hawked their life savings and got in a van and came to LA and ended up working at Guitar Center, and the big dream eluded them anyway. I don't think it matters where you are. Write a hit, get a line around the block, make a video on your cell phone that's funny or catchy, take your best shot.
Yeah, I think that's what's interesting for me as a grizzly old veteran in the business, that because of YouTube and these other ways for people to sit at home and connect that we didn't have. We actually had to go to a showcase. We actually had to show up. In some ways, while it might be difficult for some of our folks to believe it, I think it's easier in some ways if you have something and you're clever to get the attention of people in business. Okay, one more question on this whole notion of connecting with a label, which I thought was particularly good too here. It's about the right label here. Most artists, I think, they would gladly sign with any label in the world, right? And just make me a record deal and I'm in there, right? But the fact of the matter is, there are some labels that are better suited to specific types of artists than others. So our best question from Brock was, throw that one up there, Joe. What is the best route to take as far as finding the right record label for my music and then having them listen? From an artist's perspective, what if you're advising an artist and they have some ability to choose or at least decide who they're going to go out and pitch, what are the things they should be looking for when they're looking at their perfect label, Ron? You know,
this is analogous to, I hate to keep coming up with these platitudinous answers, but this is analogous to the television business. If you have a show about moms, you're going to go to Bravo, Lifetime, you know where the buyer is for that show. Same with music. It's there, and you just do the math, but at the same time, it can be daunting because the assumption that, like, I'll go to Bruno Mars label because they have Bruno Mars and that's my kind of music. It doesn't work that way because they may not want two Bruno Marses. You know, there's no real rhyme or reason to any of this, but record labels are like sports teams. They're made up of the individuals that are there at the time. Their strengths and weaknesses are the strengths and weaknesses of the individuals at the time, including the manager, right? And there's certain individuals that may have an affinity for a genre that doesn't exist in the certain individuals at another place, and it's random and it's specific, and there's no guidebook, there's no map to tell you where to go.
And isn't it the end? You spent a lot of time working. Isn't it the end of the day when you work inside a label? It's not necessarily what they did before or after. It's what their level of commitment is in that moment that you're there. I think of Young the Giant, who I'm trying to think of the label they were signed to, but they had been formerly a kind of a metal label, right? And they signed Young the Giant, who clearly is not a metal band, but they did an unbelievable job in breaking that band. So for the folks out there, you know, it's good that you're thinking about that, but you know what? You know, once you get in there, it's down to whether those people are into it or not. Okay, I want to do a new, we got a question there, Ev? We'll keep rolling here. I'm going to call this section here, Old Problems, New Tricks, Ron.
Okay.
Okay? You and I have been around for long enough to be... I'll say it, I'm proudly a grizzly old veteran of the music business, and a lot has changed since you and I started, right? Some things haven't changed at all. I still need great songs, still need great artists. If you don't have that, there is no music business. But the way consumers listen to music today, right, and all the different options they have has clearly changed. The way they watch videos, you and I spend a lot of time begging MTV to do stuff nobody cares about anymore.
Yeah.
The way music has been distributed has been a game changer. So we had a question from a member, Andrew, who wanted to know, throw that up there, Joe.
Which one is that?
Number 13.
Oh, God.
See, Joe, the numbers thing.
Yeah,
all right,
okay,
all right. It's the old veteran move here. With the global marketplace rapidly merging due to internet accessibility, streaming, and playlists, have there been changes in your A&R development process in the way you approach your job, Ron? We'll talk to more about that artist development.
There's massive changes because record labels are. Nobody buys records anymore. This is the main thing. Like only a few artists actually sell copies of records. What's happened is that music sells everything but itself. It sells the aspiration, it sells tickets, it sells merchandise, it sells the proposition of a star. People don't buy records, they don't have to. They can get them for free. You can't get clothes for free or food for free, otherwise you would.
You'd have to steal it.
So the entire equation is really changed really radically. So record companies that are engaged in signing new artists or whatever, they're looking for ways to mitigate the risk of putting money behind promotion of a song, which means social numbers, proof that something is a commercial proposition because there's a line around the block or there's Shazams. Hey, there's Shazams in Milwaukee. This thing is reacting. Let's throw money at it. But mitigating risk is not a reason to sign or not sign an artist. The artist development process that used to take place in labels is still taking place, but it's taking place in management companies, and it's taking place in living rooms, and it's taking place in garages, and it's taking place in dorms, and people are doing it themselves. It's taking place. It's just not taking place at record labels.
Interesting to hear that. Do you think it's part of it is that there's a financial element to this? When the labels were putting out CDs and making a lot more money, I think the fact that if you were going to Vegas and you had a big stack of chips, you could stay at that table long enough to see maybe your luck turn. Is it part of it a function of finances that there seems to be a level of impatience today that wasn't there when I started with Incubus?
Well, they're looking for, a record company is looking for some kind of marker that tells them your money is safe, keep betting. But you can look at any of the stories of the big stars today. Look at Taylor Swift. She started out as a kid. She had an independent label that she put together with a promotion guy, Scott Borchetta. It was funded by her family. It took years for Taylor Swift, 10 years before. By the way, she has the DNA to be, the most giant star on the planet. But it was 10 years of development. Yeah. So that 10 years of development that happened with Taylor, that doesn't typically happen in record companies anymore. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen.
She had a rich dad, though. Let's be honest.
But
right?
no, but it doesn't matter. Like you could spend all the money in the world.
Still got to have some.
She's who she is.
And that 10-year thing, we had Bruce Fleur, who I know you probably worked with back at RC. He came on the show with one of our very first guests and talked about that notion that it takes 10 years to develop a career. And I started thinking about it in terms of artists. Bruno Mars, 10 years. Taylor Swift, 10 years. From the time they started till the time they showed a career. Incubus started at 14.
This cover of Hollywood Reporter, Brie Larson, the actress who's probably going to win the Oscar, she won the Golden Globe for Room. 20 years. She started when she was 6.
Yeah. It's crazy, folks. So you got to be committed if you're going to do this. Okay, I got a couple more questions. I want to get you out of here. I'll be shot. Okay, if I don't ask this question. Okay. I love fans. They go kooky, and it doesn't matter how long ago was it that TLC had their first big hit record?
Like probably maybe 20 years ago.
20 years ago. Okay. I got news for you. Their fans today are just as crazy as they were back in the day, and so I want to post a question. One of these folks decided that he would help out by posting to a couple chat boards. He gave them the question, just said sign up and send them in. So all of a sudden we must have had 80 of these, but I'll capsulize them all by saying this.
Well, that's a great question.
The TLC fans want to know what your vision is for the new TLC album, and can you tell us anything about the new music you've heard, Ron? Let's go behind the wizard's
curtain. I'm gonna read this question because I want to. Can you put the question back up? Because I want to ruminate on it for a second.
Okay.
My vision for the new TLC album is that it's not my vision. It's their vision. They are the artist. My job and my covenant and my mission is to stand behind them and see the world through their eyes, and then capture performances and stage those performances in a recording so that they grab an audience. So my vision is to remain as neutral and as possible and leave no footprint or trace of my existence in the process. They're the artist. And that's my vision for most records, is to get in and get out without leaving a stink on it of my own. The second part of the question, what was the second? Put that one back
again, Joe.
Can I tell us about the new music? Yes, I can tell you about the new music I've heard. It's old soul music. It's 90s throwback music. It's vintage TLC, and I can tell you that their vocals sound exactly like they did the last time you heard them. Their artistic and vocal thing is 100% intact. So this is going to become a question of what are they talking about? What are the lyrics? What are the beats they've chosen? I'm very excited.
One of the other questions that came up that I remember, because was there any way to work Lisa back into it somehow?
This is unfortunately, from a tragic point of view, there is no replacement for somebody like that. If they tried to put another person in her place, it would be cheeseball. We're not going to pander to that. There's nothing that can replace her. And the high road is really to persevere and to acknowledge that it's a space that cannot be filled.
You know what? Love that. If it was Brendan O'Brien once told me something very similar. He goes, if I do my job right, nobody knows I was there. Right? And it speaks to that notion you just said. The great producers, they make those artists look great. And how they do it behind the wizard's curtain, I'm not sure anybody really needs to know, Ron.
And there's a joke that goes with it, which is that if you have a hit, the artist is a genius, and if you have a stiff, the producer screwed up.
You're right. Well, same thing in the manager business. If I used to walk in the label meeting and say, if it's a horrible idea, of course that would be mine. If it turns out to be a great idea, I ask all of you to invent the outcome any way you like. Do you have a question there, Evan, on the phone?
No.
No, okay, all right. We got to get you out of here. I promise I'd do that. Okay, coming up next on the show, we're almost out of time, so I want to do one quick plug. Ron and I were talking before the show. I did an online course here. I put it together. I was inspired by all this RenmanMB stuff to put up there. Go show it up there, would you, Joe? We're going to be doing a webinar to sell this course a little bit. It's called 5 Keys to a Successful Career in Music. That's going to be on the 27th. You'll hear some more about it on social media, folks, so I hope you'll check it out. But in a nutshell, I put together this online course. It's 150 videos and quizzes and lessons about the music business from an insider's point of view. I'm really proud of it because I think it answers so many of the frequently asked questions that folks are coming up with. So I wanted to do a little plug on that if I couldn't pay some bills. We had a question on the phone. Evan, do you remember what that guy's name was or gal's name? Huh? Didn't get a name. Okay, demerit. Okay, names, please. It was a great question here, and one that's good to end up on here. So he said, Ron, what's been personally the most rewarding project for you in your career? Can you name one? Is there something that stands out where there was one great moment where you sat there and thought, I am so fucking happy to be a part of the music business?
Yeah. that would have been the album The Breakthrough by Mary J. Blige, which I was brought into it, I would say almost surreptitiously. I was running A&M Records. Mary was on Geffen, which was the sister label. And there was a record called Be Without You, which was in an interim state, to say the least. So they had a version of the song. Through a fluke, I was asked to like evaluate the record and say like, well, what do you think of this? There was some uncertainty about what was going to happen with Mary at the time. And I heard Be Without You, and I said, well, this is a magnificent song. It's just kind of uncooked. It's unfinished. And it's like, no, that's the record. I said, no, that's not the record. It's not finished. There was some, the inspiration of it was beautiful, but in the execution of the record, there were just some things that some of the transitions weren't good, and some of the vocals maybe better, and then there was room for a string arrangement and maybe beefing up the drums. So the next thing I knew, I was on the phone with Mary J. Blige and flown to New York to work with her, and it was an instantaneous, massive radio smash. It was #1 at R&B radio for 14 weeks and #1 at pop for 5 weeks. And it all happened very quickly. That was supposed to generate the buzz for what was going to be a greatest hits record. And then I got a call from my visionary boss at the time, Jimmy Iovine, who said, you got to keep going, man. You got to do whatever you did on that. Do it on everything and make the album, and you got to do it in 30 days.
Simple, right? Yeah.
So it was a little bit of Strange Bedfellows, and that I was inserted into their camp. And fortunately, I had worked on a lot of urban records prior to that, and had great mentors like Eddie Levert and Walter Williams, the OJs. Like a lot. That's another episode.
Yeah.
But
you're welcome to come back.
we did the album over in 30 days. It was called The Breakthrough. It sold 9 million copies, which is a number that you don't really see anymore. She was nominated for 9 Grammys. We won 3. And that night, on Grammy night, I conducted the orchestra on the show. We had 56 people on stage, full strings, horns, choir. It was the most magnificent moment, really. That is really, to have a #1 record of that size is always great, and to be able to contribute in the way I did. But then getting it on the Grammys and playing on the show and conducting it, was my arrangement, was like the fulfillment of a lifelong dream. It took me back to Bill Conti, and let me just leave you with how Bill put me on my path. He said, Ron, you are a half-ass piano player. You are a half-ass arranger. You are a half-ass recording engineer. What you are is you're a producer.
You know what? I can't top that, folks. With some showbiz inks me, I'm going to take an exit. First, I want to thank everybody over there, Joe and Evan, for putting up with me and trying to drive this thing while I drive them crazy. I want to thank all the folks that were watching out there and took the time to answer the questions. I apologize if I didn't get to them. I want to thank you, Ron Fair, for taking the time.
My Twitter handle is Ron Fair Music. I don't often use it, but once in a while.
We've been promoting that, Ron, on your behalf.
Thank you. Okay. I need to break 4,000 followers. I'm about 100
We're going
short.
to help you break 4,000. Joe, put that on your schedule. Joe is that's how I met Joe Pepe. He was our social media guy from South Carolina.
He's a digital self-marketer. He's a musician.
Well, he was working for us, and he just kept doing it and doing all our stuff. So anyway, I want to thank you, and we'll make sure we promote that. My name is Steve Rennie, folks. My friends call me Renman. I hope you can too. The show's called Renman Live, and I hope to see you next week. We are out here. Thanks for watching. If you want to learn the music business, let me be your music business mentor. When you get done with my course, you won't be thinking like some rookie getting out of college. You'll think like a grizzly music business veteran.